The TMJ-TMD conundrum is real and has been puzzling the dental and medical professions for decades. This is the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast with Dr. Tony Urbanic, where we'll connect the dots between TMD symptoms and the actual cause. We'll tackle common TMD misconceptions and educate you, the practitioner, about a simple, tested, and proven TMD solution that has already provided relief to thousands of patients, while helping practitioners build an additional source of income free from insurance control. Welcome to this episode of the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast.
Hello, TMD warriors. We are here for the next episode of TMD Demystified. I am Tony Urbanic, and I appreciate you being with us and joining in on the work that is available and the information that's available to solve the TMD dilemma. Today's title is TMD was a mystery wrapped in a conundrum inside an enigma until it wasn't. And I think that is a good title for what most dentists know as TMD, TMJ, a mystery wrapped in a conundrum inside an enigma. But it has been figured out, and I claim that, I can prove that, I would like to share it with you, and today we're going to talk about what really kept it as a mystery and a conundrum and an enigma. And it had some very specific parts. And I think if you really understand to begin with what those parts were, why it was kept hidden, then it'll make more sense to you, much more sense to you, when I'm able to explain to you what was discovered and how it was discovered, and that it is no longer a conundrum or an enigma, but the circumstances were really obvious once investigated. In 1934, James Costin wrote his first article describing the symptoms of TMD, which he described really as jaw pain and ear pain. He was an ENT surgeon from St. Louis. And actually, part of his article was after he described the symptoms and gave examples from the patients in the series that he had treated and covered, his opinion, and it was his opinion, that the cause of this phenomenon was lack of posterior teeth, lack of posterior dental support. And from there on, because he, the authority in the medical community, happened to be an ENT surgeon, stated that it was really lack of dental support, that it was placed in the lap of the dental industry to actually solve the problem. And according to his theory, the solution was to replace posterior teeth. And at that time, 1934, the only opportunity to do that was partial dentures. But at that point in time, that's where it got placed in the lap of dentistry to treat and solve. But that didn't work out very well, because for the next 90 years, the real solution to the problem was not available, because the understanding of the pathogenesis of the disease was not visible. I didn't say that it wasn't easy to understand. I said it just wasn't visible. And it wasn't visible for several reasons, but we will go through that in a symptomatic way here briefly. But it was really truth over tradition. Dentistry had its traditions. It had this problem dumped in its lap. And for the most part, both the practitioners in dentistry who saw the problem or had patients with the problem, or more importantly, the dental schools who took somewhat of a responsibility, and I do emphasize somewhat, of a responsibility to look after the problem, try to solve the disease, now known as TMD. They applied primarily the emotion that they were attached to. So the first real stumbling block was to get over the emotional attachment that dentists and dentistry had on the procedures and processes that were already in place. And it was really, for 90 years, it was a series of dentists of different specialties and different levels of work in their practices and in the schools that really just applied what they were familiar with emotionally, and either intentionally, or I would hope to say unintentionally, ignored looking into what was already present in the medical and scientific literature. And it's there to look at. But when I say the dentists were emotionally connected to what they knew, we can go right down the list. If you were an orthodontist and faced with a patient with TMD, then you applied what you knew to do as an orthodontist, move teeth, to try to solve the problem of the symptoms of TMD. If you're a general dentist and used to adjusting teeth or filling teeth, modifying the occlusion of teeth, your solution, whether no matter how sophisticated or unsophisticated it was circling around adjusting the occlusion. If you're an OMS, and I'm very familiar with that phenomenon all the way back to my entry into the specialty of oral and maxillofacial surgery in 1973, if you were a surgeon, then you automatically, emotionally went to surgical procedures and surgical knowledge to try to solve the phenomenon of TMD. If you're an MD, of which I'm familiar with most colleagues in the specialties and general natures of medical practice, what they have to offer are drugs. And so if you are a medical doctor, then what you offer to patients with the symptoms of TMD, whether they're a single symptom or multiple disparate symptoms, patients are offered various kinds of drugs. And I don't have to go through the litany of the many kinds and categories of drugs that are offered. Nowadays, the buzzword is botulinum toxin A, or Botox, as the newest and greatest treatment for TMD without significant validation. In fact, a significant amount of invalidation. My last episode noted the article in the Journal of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery that literally proves statistically that injecting botulinum toxin A into the masseter muscle or saline into the masseter muscle for the treatment of TMD pain are equal in effectiveness. Saline and Botox are equal in effectiveness, injecting it into a muscle. Take that and think about it. And then going down the rest of the list, if you're a physical therapist and you're used to dry needling, that phenomenon, it is a phenomenon. If you dry needle a muscle, the muscle tends to relax. And if that muscle has a painful part to it, by the way, muscles don't have pain sensors in them. Muscles do not have pain sensors in them, but you can relax a muscle by dry needling it adequately. And then the physical therapist being emotionally attached to dry needle for TMD. Of course, there's significant complications associated with that I've gone into in the past. Massage therapists, same thing. They're used to massaging a muscle to get it to relax, so that's what they do. Chiropractors, pretty much same thing. They have their little gun that taps on a muscle or muscle area of the face to try to stimulate that or stimulate the muscle or destimulate the muscle to relax. But that only serves a one particular localized area. Acupuncturist is another. They're emotionally attached to acupuncture. And then you have the very small number of TMD gurus who go down that menu list of each and every one of those opportunities and use as many as possible, and then basically try to game the insurance companies to pay for them. And that for the past 90 years has been the expectations and the quote science, and I put them in quotes for sure, on treating TMD. But the second stumbling block was really lack of knowledge, because, what I just went over was all of the dental doctors who were emotionally attached to what they knew best. And if they had a hammer, everything looked like a nail. And so their hammer was orthodontics, surgery, drugs, dry needling, and they applied that to TMD. But the real issue was lack of knowledge, and the lack of knowledge revolved around the very simple fact and very true fact, and no one has ever argued with me on this at all when I bring it up, that this joint, the temporomandibular joint, operates like every other joint in the body. And you were taught in dental school just the opposite, that this joint is unique, it is special, it is complicated, which is not. It's not special. It isn't unique. It does have a unique space in the body. It kind of has a unique attitude or way that it works with both rotation and translation. But the pathophysiology of this joint operates like the pathophysiology of any joint in the body. And as a physician, as a scientist in cell biology and anatomy, and 2 years doing research with the NIH, NIDCR on facial growth and development, I was well aware that this joint operates like any other joint in the body. And that was the starting point that I began my investigation. But the knowledge has already been there. The knowledge is there. The orthopedic surgeons know that there is a pathophysiologic mechanism that creates muscles associated with a joint to tighten up when the joint becomes inflamed. And this applies to your knee, it applies to the hip, it applies especially obvious to the elbow. I've talked on this many times before. We're just taking a little different cut at it today, a different way to explain it. But the orthopedic surgeons are well aware that when the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, right there, becomes inflamed because of too much tennis or too much repetitive motion of the forearm, or where I come from, too much bingo elbow, going down bingo cards all night long. The ladies used to do that multiple nights per week and end up with bingo elbow. But the phenomenon is when you have an inflamed joint, it sends a signal to the brain stem that says it's inflamed through the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic portion. And the brainstem receives that signal, modulates it, and sends a signal back down. It says, I'm going to help you out. Don't move the joint. Hold the joint still. Don't move the joint. Tighten up the muscles that move the joint. And that's why tennis elbow, the complaint is not pain in the elbow as much, anywhere near as much as pain in the forearm, all the way into the wrist, sometimes even into the fingers when all the muscles get stimulated to totally tighten up. Well, that phenomenon is well known, has been well known for well over 70 years, at least 70 years, in the orthopedic community, in the orthopedic literature. I was taught that in my rotation in orthopedics at Vanderbilt as I went through my medical training and oral and maxillofacial surgery training on orthopedic rotations with my orthopedic buddies. Well, that is the same phenomenon that applies to this joint because it is no different than any other joint in the body. And so for 90 years, with the problem of TMD dumped in the lap of dentists, and they had no intention or desire to read the medical literature because they knew this joint was different, they did not have the opportunity to know what the orthopedic surgeons know about this, and the whole thing was totally missed. Absolutely totally missed. But when you do understand the pathophysiology of TMD, then the solution of it actually comes into play. It comes into view. It becomes very obvious. The right thing to do to treat TMD. And I will be the first to admit, take full responsibility for the better part of 36 years, beginning when I began my training and followed by 36 years of private practice until I quit doing TMJ surgery, which was now 14 years ago. But when I quit doing TMJ surgery and decided to do investigation of my own to see what was really going on here, because I knew that the surgeons didn't have the solution. After 36 years of doing TMJ surgery, I was not enamored by the results. Although we did have some good results, I did have some good results, but 30 to 40% of the people would be back in my office no matter what kind of surgery I did on the temporomandibular joint, whether it be open joint surgery or surgery through an arthroscope. A third or more of the patients would be back in my office with the same symptoms within a year or two. And that, in my mind, ethically, was not good enough to tell people that I was going to fix them. And so I read the literature when I decided to quit doing surgery, and I investigated it. Basically, though, fortunately so, at the opportunity of listening to my patients rather than telling my patients what I was going to do for them surgically. So the first part of a medical investigation should be a thorough history and investigation with the people that have the problem, and to gain an excellent history of the problem from the people who have it, and develop your symptoms, develop the relationships that you may be able to make. But in doing that investigation with roughly 24 women who had 10 to 30 years of headache, earache, jaw pain, neck pain, etc., half of them said, if I put something between my front teeth and gently bite down, it feels better. A decision was made that I wonder what would happen if I put something in between the front teeth that the patient could speak with, could wear 24/7 to give it enough time to be effective. What would happen? And I gave it to the first lady in line, asked her to keep it in 24/7 for 3 weeks, and she came back in 3 weeks and said her pain was gone after 20 years of suffering with headaches, earaches, jaw pain. And that's where my tour started, in developing a simple device that the patient can speak with, they can hold in their mouth easily. It stays in place. They don't have to hold it in place. And according to a protocol, because the proper way to use this device or tool had to be worked out. It's not just putting a device in somebody's mouth and hoping for the best. You have to know how it works. You have to know the nuances. You have to know the pathophysiology, though, first. So that was the second big stumbling block of why it wasn't discovered for 90 years. And then the third I mentioned was the inductive reasoning rather than deductive reasoning. Inductively, my patient said, if I do such and such, it feels better. That's inductive reasoning. And then once I repeated that several times, when I got up to 40 or 50 times of repeating it, I decided I had no idea how it worked, what was going on, and then I went back to the books, to what I knew of the basic sciences, and it was easy to figure out what was going on, adding what my orthopedic surgeons had taught me, which is tennis elbow works by a signal going to this brainstem saying I'm inflamed, and the brainstem saying I'm going to help you out. We're going to help you. Don't move that joint, tighten up. So as it works out, the best way to treat TMD is like you treat tennis elbow. Tennis elbow is best treated easily, effectively, by putting the elbow in the arm, forearm, and arm in a sling. What does a sling do? It takes the load off of the elbow. It takes the constant motion. You basically unload the joint long enough. Now, how long? Well, that is probably different between patients and elbows, and how bad the tennis elbow is and how long it's been going on. But the same phenomenon is the exact same phenomenon that works in this temporomandibular joint. Tennis elbow and TMD are the same device. Excuse me, the same disease. And basically the device is similar. A device that takes the load off the joint by taking the load off the posterior teeth, disoccluding the posterior teeth long enough to unload the joint. But you have to unload the joint long enough because it takes a while for inflammation to die down once the joint is unloaded. And that varies between patients. It varies between how long the inflammation has been there. Certainly, it has something to do with the anatomy of the area, how much damage is already there, but I can assure you that it doesn't depend on whether the disc is dislocated, whether the disc has a hole in it, how much degenerative change has already affected the bones, how many subcondylar cysts are present, whether or not you have a hockey stick looking condyle. It's all about decreasing the inflammation within the joint. So hopefully, as you follow this presentation, it seems obvious that it developed into a mystery wrapped in a conundrum inside an enigma only because emotions were applied to the solution rather than logic. Lack of knowledge, basically, in the medical information that was already available, and then a little inductive reasoning to find the key that opened the door to find the common denominator for the problem itself, which is inflammation. Inflammation within the joint drives all the symptoms, drives all of the disparate symptoms. It drives all the symptoms, first causing the muscles of mastication to tighten up, then the muscles of the neck to tighten up, and then the muscles of the upper back and shoulder girdle to tighten up. And over time, it's a progressive disease, starting out with the facial jaw pain, then the neck pain, then the upper shoulder girdle pain, which can even lead to arm, hand, finger tingling and numbness, and ringing, fullness, and dizziness, tinnitus, subjective hearing loss, which is fullness in the ears, feeling of fullness in the ears like you've been swimming and can't clear your ear, and vertigo are directly caused by inflammation coming from the glenoid fossa, from the temporomandibular joint, through the petrotympanic fissure into the middle ear. And inflammatory fluids exudates into the middle ear will change the milieu of the endolymph to the point where you gain the symptoms of tinnitus, subjective hearing loss, and vertigo. So TMD is no longer a mystery wrapped in a conundrum in an enigma. It just isn't any longer. And our problem is that in the dental industry, in the dental profession, enough time has gone by since the identification 90 years ago by Dr. James Costin that so much misinformation and mistreatment and misdiagnosis of this problem that everyone is frustrated and has been frustrated to the point they don't want anything to do with this disease. They have just given up. No, it is true. It's an easy thing to say. The dental industry has given up trying to solve this problem. Half the dentists, when they hear the word TMD, close their ears, close their mind, because they know nothing works. The patients are nothing but problems, and there is no solution. Half of the dentists, or almost half of the rest of the dentists, will make a night guard because that's what they were taught in dental school, give it to the patient, and hope the patient doesn't come back. And then there, as I said, there are the few dental gurus that use a menu of each and every one of those procedures or treatments that have been thrown against the wall over the years to see where they stick. They're only treating a particular symptom, not treating the cause. And those dental gurus use multiple machines and procedures and treatments on that menu, and then argue with the medical insurance companies to pay for it. That's been the scene, and I stick by it. And as I paint this picture many times, and it is confronting, and it does sound to some people somewhat wanting to be confrontational, which is not my purpose. My purpose is not to be confrontational. My purpose is to bring out the facts and the logic and get rid of the rest of the nonsense. And no one argues with me. I can't get anyone to argue with the facts of the situation as I have discovered it and as I talk about it and I describe it. I hope this has been helpful to you. If you are interested in treating TMD successfully, you can look into becoming a network provider and become a member of our team. Become a member of the team that uses this device, which is patented, FDA cleared, independent university studied, showing success rates, proving our success rates of 90% if the patient will follow, 90+% if the patient will follow the protocol. That's one of our biggest problems, patients not following the protocol. But most people want to follow the protocol. They want to get rid of the symptoms. So, but on a few patients, they won't follow the protocol, and that's explains that top 5 or 10% that we can't get that consistent treatment for, success for. You can look at our website, www.urbanictmj.com. We'll give you the opportunity to learn more. You can get access to me. You get access to the opportunity to join our network of doctors who successfully treat this problem easily. We now have doctors in 19 states. I look forward to the next time we'll talk. I appreciate you sticking to the end of this. Don't hesitate to contact me if you'd like to talk. Tony at tmjservices.net. I'm open for criticism. I'm open for discussion. I look forward to the next time that you're here to meet with us. Until next time, I'm Tony Urbanic, and this is TMD Demystified.